Canva is one of the absolute best free tools for bloggers and designers looking to create great graphics to support their business, but it's going to be even better if you master these tricks and keyboard shortcuts I'm going to show you right now. Okay, let's start with an example of one of the things that drove me crazy when I first started using Canva. And I'll show you a way around it so it doesn't drive you crazy as well. And that is selecting tough to select elements or hidden elements. So right now on screen I have this green rectangle, I have a heading, and then I have an outline around my heading. But because of the outline around the heading, for some reason Canva will not let me select this heading. If I try to click on it, it's just selecting the outline around this. Well, the way around this is a shortcut key, and on the PC it's going to be Control plus Alt plus your left or right bracket key. And when you do that, it's then going to cycle through the layers in your layer stack, selecting different layers. And so now you can see I was able to come in here and select that heading. So again, on the PC, you're going to want to use Control plus Alt plus your left or right bracket key, and on a Mac that would be Command plus Option plus your left or right bracket key. And this will save you from huge headaches when you cannot select an element. This even works for hidden elements. So if I were to take this and send this heading to the back, and send it so it's behind the rectangle, and now I have the rectangle selected, well, I'm not going to be able to select it by clicking on it because it's going to select a rectangle, or it's going to select this outline, same problem as before. But if I use that same trick, my Control Alt and my bracket key, then look, it has pulled and it has selected that element, and then that would allow me to rescue it and bring it forward in layer stack. So again, crucial shortcut, make sure you master this one. And next tip, how did I move that up or down in the layer stack? Well, with a layer selected, you can come up here to arrange. You can send something forwards or backwards. But if you see here, you can also use Control and your left or right bracket key. So just Control, left or right bracket keys, and you can move something up or down in the layer stack. And of course, on a Mac, that would be Command plus your left or right bracket key. Moving on to another example, let's talk about selecting multiple elements on a page. If you want to select one element, of course, you just click on it and it will become highlighted. But if you want to select multiple elements with an object selected, you would then hit the Shift key and then click on another object, and then you can select the multiple elements, as many as you want, and then you're able to move them together. Now, you'll notice with all these objects selected, this Arrange button here is still grayed out. There is another option for moving elements together, and that is grouping elements. When you group elements, essentially you compress them down temporarily into one layer, and then that gives you even more options. Let's talk about that. So right now these are all selected but not grouped, so if I click off of these and then I click back on one of these, I'm only going to have one selected. However, you can also select the multiple objects by dragging a box around all the elements you want to select, and then I'm going to show you how to group them together. You have this button up here, but you can also just hit Control plus G on your keyboard or Command plus G on a Mac and group objects together that way. So if I do that now and do Control plus G on my keyboard, you'll see that this change from group to ungroup lets me know that they are grouped. So if I click off them now and then click back on one of them, you'll see that the whole thing is selected and that I can then move them together. Now to ungroup them, I would use Control Shift plus G. So that's Control plus G to group them, Control plus Shift plus G to ungroup them. And let me say the Z key works, so you can use Control G or you can use Control Z. They both work. So that's a great trick. And there are other advantages to grouping objects. So right now I have all these selected, but they are not grouped together, and you'll see this Arrange is grayed out. But if I hit Control G and group them together, then suddenly I have this Arrange icon here, which I can click on. And then suddenly, because they're grouped, you suddenly have all these options for arranging the elements together. So for example, if you wanted to top align these elements, it would automatically do that for you. You could bottom align, you could middle line. So you can check out the different options here, but just know these options are only available when you have objects grouped together. Now let me show you another advantage of grouping elements that can come into play when you're working with text. So let's imagine you're creating a graphic and you want to have a background box behind your title text. So that's going to be this green box here. And I'm going to go ahead and click some text to bring some text up onto the screen. And I'm going to take this text and I will just drag it up and put it here so it is within the background box here. Now of course you can come in here and you can resize this box to be what you want. But so let's imagine you want a multi-line heading. If I come up here onto my text and I'm going to go to the end of the line here and I'm going to hit a carriage return enter on my keyboard, and then I'm going to add line 2, and maybe you have a graphic where you even have a line 3. Now, if I do that, you notice that my background box is still the same. So I would then have to come up here and manually adjust this. And that's not that big of a deal, but there is a way to do it smarter so it will automatically resize, and that can save you time, especially if you're doing something where you're creating a template where you don't know what the size of the heading's going to be every time, and you want something that's going to be smart and something that's going to adjust on the fly. So let's look at how we would do that. So here I am again with the background box on screen, and I will go and add a heading again, and I will position this heading up so it is within the background box there. But this time, before I add any more text, what I'm going to do is go ahead and select around both of these, and then I will Control G, group those together. And then now, since they are grouped together, watch what happens when I come up here and hit a carriage return to add more lines of text. Suddenly I have something that's more dynamic where the background box is automatically sizing to fit the text. So I think you can imagine situations where you create a template where that's going to be very helpful, and it's going to save you time. Now you probably realize you can select any element on page and then use your mouse to drag it around the screen, but another trick for more precise movement that you definitely want to know is just to know that you can use your left, right, up or down arrow keys to move something 1 pixel at a time, or if you combine that with the shift key, then you're moving things up, down, left or right 10 pixels at a time. And this just comes in really handy when you're trying to make subtle movements of various degrees. Okay, let's talk about a few more text tricks. If you want to take something and go from uppercase to lowercase or vice versa, you can use the keyboard shortcut Control plus Shift plus K on your keyboard, and that goes both ways. It'll take it to capital letters, it'll take it to lowercase, so lowercase, uppercase. Now you can also use this button up here, it'll do the same thing. I like to teach you just keyboard shortcuts because the keyboard shortcuts do save you time. Alright, same idea with text alignment. You have alignment buttons up here where you can go left align, you can go center align, you can make something right aligned, and if you want to know the keyboard shortcuts for text alignment, they are Control plus Shift plus L for left aligned, Control plus Shift plus C for center aligned, and Control plus Shift plus R for right aligned. Now remember, for Mac users that would be Command plus Shift, and also remember that the alignment is going to depend on the size of the text box, the bounding box of the text box. So if I drag it all the way over here and all the way over here, and then you see it's going to left or right align or center align based on the bounds of that box. So if I just go through here, we see that now the alignment is based on the bounds of that box. And also keep in mind, when you drag things along, it is pretty good at Canva about snapping things into place. So you can also grab that text and pull it along, and it is really good about snapping to edges of other elements that you already have within your design. Another text trick, with your text highlighted, if you want to add a border directly to the text, you can use Alt plus Shift plus B. That would be Option plus Shift plus B on a Mac. And then if you want to change the size of that border, you can go Alt plus Shift and then use the plus or minus keys to raise or lower that border size. As long as we're talking borders, let me give you one more border trick. This is another one that if you don't know this, it could drive you absolutely crazy. And we don't want that to happen. So let me give you this simple trick. Okay, so I have some default text on screen here. Let's imagine I want to add some sort of frame or bounding box around it, sort of to make it stand out. So if you go under Elements and you go under Shapes, get Shapes to scroll down here, you have this option here. So I can drag this on screen and have this nice box or frame around my element. But I want to make sure that I can get that exactly to the size, sort of the bounding area, and also the width of this line. I want that to be exactly what I want also. So here's what you have to know. These center points and these corner points are going to work differently when you're resizing things. If you drag in from the center points, it is going to change the bounds of the box, but you'll notice the width of this line here is staying exactly the same. If I want the width of this line to change, I have to use a corner point. Then you'll notice as I'm dragging in, you'll notice that this line, the width, is getting different. It's getting thinner as I drag in, wider as you drag out. And then if I use my outer points, my sort of my center points there, then I can resize the bounding area. So you have to use those in combination when you're working with a frame like this or an outline line like this. From the corners, the width of that line is going to change as you change the bounding area. If you use the center areas, the center points here, then it's not going to change. So you use those together, and then you can get exactly the bounding area and exactly the width of the line that you want. A few others that you might be familiar with from other programs: Control A, Control plus C, Control V. those work the same as they always do. So Control A for select all, that's going to select everything on a page. That would be Command A on a Mac. Control C for copy, Command C on a Mac, that will copy it, and then Control V for paste, Command V on a Mac, and that will paste. So that's an easy way to select everything on a page and copy it and paste it. Of course, if you just selected a single element, you could also do a Control C and Control V. So whatever elements you have selected, then Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and if you want to select everything, obviously a Control A, and those are Command on the Mac. Here's one for grids. As you probably know, a grid is just a collection of frames grouped together, and then you can drop pictures, images, or elements into those frames. So I'll just real quick drop a couple of pictures in here. Just an example of dropping images into a frame. But what I really want to talk about is grid spacing. Now, for this white space, the space in between a grid here with the grid selected, you can come up here and you can go under spacing, and you can use this slider to increase the space, or if you take it all the way to the left, then that space is going to disappear. And that works great, but I want you to know the keyboard shortcut you can do for that is with your frame selected here, with your grid selected, you just do Alt or Option plus Shift plus the plus or minus key on your keyboard. And so with plus, you see I'm increasing the size of the border there, and with the minus, I am decreasing that. So that's Alt or Option plus the Shift key plus the plus or minus key on your keyboard to change the size of a border when you're working with a grid. Another quick trick, if you want an object to expand to fit the bounds of your page, you would use the Alt or Option key and then the Control or Command key and then F. So on Windows, that would be Alt Control plus F, and that's going to fit it to the bounds of the page, and that would be Option Command F on a Mac. Now whether you run into the top of the page or the sides of the page first, that's going to depend on the sort of proportions of the original object. So obviously if this had been a smaller object and sort of wider like that, and then I went with the same keyboard shortcut, Alt Control F, then we see it expands and it hits the side of the page. So again, it's expanding out proportionally until it hits the sides or the top and the bottom of the page. Now if you ever find you want to undo the action you just did, it'll be Control plus Z on your keyboard. So Control plus Z, and I see it'll undo that resize that I did, and that would be Control plus Shift plus Z if you want to do a redo. So again, Control Z or Command Z to undo the last step, and then if you want to redo something, you do Control plus Shift or Command plus Shift and Z. Here's another one. If you use the keyboard shortcut Control plus a semicolon, that would be Command plus a semicolon on a Mac. So Control plus semicolon, you'll bring up this design grid, and then that really gives you an extra way to really pay attention to your layout. And again, you're really probably going to want to do most of your layouts where you have some sort of column rule where you're spacing things equally. So I will go ahead in here, Control C, Control V, and then just show you how you can use that design grid to really space things appropriately in your design. So again, if you want to see the design grid underneath, it's just Control plus a semicolon, Command plus a semicolon on a Mac. Okay, so here's another one when it comes to locking dimensions and sizing things proportionally. And this is just another one of those Canva quirks, and you have to know it, and once you know it, you'll be good. But until you know it, it might drive you a little crazy. So I have just a grid on here, and I have a picture on here. I could, if I wanted to, I could get another copy of the picture here, and I could drag it in there into that thing. And so this is an image in a grid, and this is the image by itself, and not in a grid. Now, if I grab this image not in a grid, and I use the Alt key on my keyboard to resize, then as I resize using the Alt key, and that would be the Option key on your Mac, then it's resizing proportionally. However, if I were to try the Shift key, then I can see I'm moving all around and it is not locking those proportions, so then I run the danger of doing something like this where I have distorted my image. So I'll do Control Z to back out of that. So when you're resizing an image, you really want to use that Alt key. Now grids work the opposite way. If I use that Alt key on my grid, look, I can totally go ahead and change the size of the grid. Now, the image itself is not getting distorted because within that, it's just getting cropped. But again, if I want to proportionately keep the same dimensions on my grid, the Alt key isn't going to work. Instead, I'm going to have to use the Shift key. And now if I use my Shift key, I can try to go ahead and move all around, and I'm not going to be able to break out of those constrained proportions. Okay, here's a trick that's not going to apply all the time, but when it does, it really can save you a lot of time, and for that reason, I think it's going to become one of your favorite tricks. So here I have a Media Kit template that I created, and green is the predominant color here. Now, if you click on any vector element within your image, so it's not going to work on a photo, but on any vector element in your image, then you're going to get a swatch up here. You choose that color swatch, and then you select down here, and you're choosing a new color. However, when you change that color, when you click on the swatch, you're going to suddenly see this change all button down here. If you check this, watch what happens. All the elements that had that color in your design have changed. So you've saved a ton of time. If I had to individually select all these, that's going to take way more time than this little trick right here. Now, just to show you that it's going to affect all of the same color, I'm going to go up here for a second. I'll select this one. I'll set this one to a different color, so we'll make that a red, and then I'll come back down here and I'll do the same trick. And if I'm going back to that green and checking this here, see now it changes all of these, but it no longer changes this one because that one is a different color. So even if you have two colors in your color scheme, this trick is still going to work and it's still going to save you time. Thanks so much for watching. I know if you master those 20 tips we covered in the last 15 minutes, you're really going to be able to do more in Canva with less time. And saving time, that's what we're all about. Alright, best to you. This is Greg from Purpose Blogger. Hit the subscribe button below and stay up to date on all the latest tutorials. Thank you.